All right. Good afternoon, everyone. In a short while, I will be joined by my guest, Kishan Khode, who is the UNDP resident representative for the Bahamas, Belize, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, and Turks and Caicos Islands. He will join us from Kingston to brief on the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. This morning in Brazil, the Secretary General spoke at the Plenary of Leaders of the Belém Climate Summit. He noted that the hard truth is that we have failed to ensure that we remain below 1.5 degrees. The Secretary General pointed out that after decades of denial and delay, science now tells us that a temporary overshoot beyond the 1.5 degree limit is inevitable, starting at the latest in the early 2030s. He stressed that we need a fundamental paradigm shift to limit this overshoot's magnitude and duration and quickly drive it down. The Secretary General warned that even a temporary overshoot will unleash far greater destruction and cost for every nation. Every fraction of a degree means more hunger, displacement, and loss, especially for those least responsible. This morning, the Secretary General held bilateral meetings with the President of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. He also met the first-ranked Vice Premier of the People's Republic of China, Ding Xushang. Also today, the Secretary General is to address the launch of the Tropical Forest Forever facility. He will say that tropical forests breathe life into our planet. Yet, he will add, they remain under relentless assault, treated as short-term profit, not long-term value. And this afternoon, the Secretary General will deliver remarks at a session on climate and nature, forests, and ocean. He will also meet with other leaders attending the conference. This morning, here in New York, the head of the UN Environment Program, Inger Andersen, addressed a session of the Security Council dedicated to the environmental impact of armed conflict. She told council members that environmental damage caused by conflicts continues to push people into hunger, disease, and displacement, increasing insecurity. She added that climate change exacerbates tensions and under some conditions contributes to conflicts, and that conflict-affected countries and communities must be supported with tools to protect natural resources and the environment. In her remarks, Ms. Andersen highlighted 3 priorities that would enhance environmental support to conflict-affected countries. She told council members that the first priority should be to rebuild national capacity for environmental management, supported by science-based assessments and tools. Member states should also increase investments in climate adaptation in conflict-affected countries. And as we head to COP30 in Belém, Ms. Andersen said, high ambition is needed both on adaptation and on mitigation. Every fraction of a degree avoided means lower losses for people and ecosystems and greater opportunities for peace and prosperity. And as you probably know, today is the International Day for preventing the exploitation of the environment in war and armed conflict. It's a reminder that protecting ecosystems is vital for lasting peace. Today, the World Meteorological Organization published its State of the Climate update for COP30. The report, released in Belém, says that the alarming streak of exceptional temperatures continued this year, and 2025 is said to be either the second or third warmest year on record. The report also reveals that the past 11 years, from 2015 to 2025, are said to be the warmest on record, with each year surpassing previous temperature highs. Concentrations of heat-trapping greenhouse gases and ocean heat content, which both reached record levels last year, continue to rise in 2025. Arctic sea ice extent after the winter freeze was the lowest on record, and Antarctic sea ice extent tracked well below average throughout the year. The long-term sea level rise trend continued despite a small and temporary blip due to naturally occurring factors. You can find the full report online. Turning to the Gaza Strip, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that continued detonations of residential buildings have been reported daily in multiple areas where the Israeli military remains deployed, especially in eastern Khan Yunis, eastern Gaza City, and Rafah. Israeli military strikes near or east of the so-called Yellow Line also continue to be reported, resulting in casualties, especially in Gaza City and Deir el-Bala and Khan Yunis governorates. OCHA stresses that these military activities put civilians, including aid workers, at risk, and reminds the Israeli military of its obligation to take constant care to spare them throughout its operations. Meanwhile, our partners monitoring population movements report that families continue to move across the Strip. More than 680,000 movements from southern to northern Gaza have been observed since the onset of the ceasefire, while nearly 113,000 movements from western to eastern Khan Yunis have also been reported. However, our partners say that many displaced people have reported a desire to remain in their current locations due to widespread destruction, lack of alternatives, and continued uncertainty about safety and services in their areas of origin. Against this backdrop, the UN and our humanitarian partners continue to reach people in need where access allows and provide life-saving assistance, including food, health, water and sanitation services, shelter, and other essential items, in line with the 60-day plan. Our partners report that since the ceasefire and as of Monday, they have distributed multi-purpose cash assistance to over 55,000 households, compared with 40,000 in September. Each household received the equivalent of about $378 in digital payments. Our partners note that households are mainly spending cash assistance on food such as grains, vegetables, and pulses, while also using funds to repay debts and purchase hygiene items and medicines. OCHA says that the impact of the humanitarian scale-up in Gaza, which we've been reporting on for almost a month now, is already clear. Yet, as we've been saying, the UN and our partners can do more when other impediments are lifted. For instance, some relief items rejected for entry into Gaza are ones which Israeli authorities deem to fall outside the scope of humanitarian aid. Other items are classified as dual use, ranging from vehicles and their spare parts to solar panels, some types of mobile latrines, X-ray machines, and generators. Our partners report that since the ceasefire, the Israeli authorities have rejected 107 requests for the entry of relief materials, including blankets, winter clothes, and tools and material to maintain and operate water, sanitation, and hygiene services. Almost 90% of these rejected requests were from over 30 local and international NGOs, of which more than half of the requests were denied on the grounds that the organizations were not authorized to bring relief items into Gaza. Another impediment that we are facing is the lack of sufficient warehouse capacity inside the Strip, which is vital to sustain the 60-day response plan and maintain supply chains. Turning to Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns of a dire humanitarian situation for thousands of families displaced from El Fasher in North Darfur State following recent violence. Across the locality of Tawala and surrounding areas, displaced people are living in extremely harsh conditions, without adequate food, clean water, shelter, or medical care. Humanitarian organizations are working with local partners to support the establishment of new camps to accommodate recent arrivals from El Fasher, adding to the more than 650,000 displaced people who have already sought refuge in Tawala. In the Tawala al-Amda displacement camp alone, more than 3,000 recent arrivals are in urgent need of basic items and shelter assistance, including plastic sheeting, mats, and blankets as temperatures drop. Many, including the injured, people with disabilities, and unaccompanied children, are sleeping in the open without protection or sanitation facilities. Similar conditions prevail in the camps of Daba al-Naira and Jangur, where over 6,500 people who recently escaped attacks in El Fasher lacked shelter and essential supplies. On Tuesday, an interagency mission led by the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator in Sudan, Antoine Girard, arrived in Tawala to engage with affected people and local communities, assess needs, and strengthen the ongoing response. Meanwhile, our partners report that hundreds of displaced families who fled El Fasher on foot have reached Al-Daba locality in northern state after days of walking through harsh conditions. Some 2,800 people are now sheltering in overcrowded sites with little access to food, water, or medical assistance, and many lost family members during the journey. With more families expected to arrive in the coming days, urgent assistance is needed, including food, medical care, psychosocial support, shelter, and warm clothing, especially as temperatures drop. The UN and partners are mobilizing additional emergency supplies for the area, but available stocks are limited. Meanwhile, fighting continues in West Kordofan state, with civilian casualties reported in recent clashes. Dozens of families displaced from Al-Udaya locality have reached El Ubaid in neighboring North Kordofan after fleeing attacks near Nahud over the past 2 weeks. The situation in the area remains highly volatile and dynamic, with displacement out of El Obeid also having been reported in recent days by our colleagues from the International Organization for Migration. Many arrived exhausted and hungry after several days on foot. Some 250 displaced people are currently staying in 4 temporary shelters, with minimal access to basic services. Local authorities and organizations have established communal kitchens, but food stocks are running low. With the onset of colder weather, displaced families urgently need blankets, mosquito nets, warm clothing, and medical assistance for children, older people, and those suffering from chronic illness. OCHA stresses that urgent additional support is needed to meet rising humanitarian needs in the Darfur and Kordofan regions. This year's humanitarian response plan for Sudan is only 28% funded, with $1.17 billion received to date of the $4.16 billion required. Turning to Afghanistan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that the UN and our partners are scaling up their response following the earthquake that struck the north of the country on Monday. According to authorities, 25 people have been killed and nearly 1,000 have been injured. Assessments by the UN found that around 800 houses were damaged, although the number could rise further as further evaluations take place. An aerial survey conducted just after the earthquake found no major structural damage. Roads remain passable, water continues to flow through irrigation channels, and key community infrastructure appears largely intact. Immediate priorities include emergency shelter, such as winterized tents, blankets, and tarps, as well as warm clothing, cash for heating, and repair kits for damaged homes. There's also an urgent need for additional health support, particularly mobile clinics, trauma care for remote areas, and ambulance and referral capacity. We and our partners are on the ground delivering aid. The International Organization for Migration is providing tents, emergency shelter kits, and blankets. UNICEF and its partners are also distributing clothes and hygiene kits, while the World Food Programme is delivering food packages, including high-energy biscuits. On the health front, the World Health Organization and its partners delivered emergency medical supplies and are assisting local authorities with coordination and service delivery. The UN continues to call on member states to support the people of Afghanistan to meet their humanitarian needs. The $2.4 billion humanitarian needs and response plan is just 35% funded, with $857 million received so far. And turning to the Caribbean, we have an update on the humanitarian response to Hurricane Melissa from our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. In Jamaica, some 1.5 million people have been affected, having lost homes, water, electricity, and livelihoods. Authorities have so far confirmed 32 deaths, with nearly 36,000 people in need of food assistance. More than 100,000 housing structures have been damaged. At least 30 communities are still cut off, and electricity, telecommunications, and road signals remain severely disrupted in some parishes. The UN, supported by an OCHA-led 16-member UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination Team, is coordinating relief efforts with the government and partners. More than 60 organizations, including authorities, donors, NGOs, UN agencies, and the private sector, have signed on to the OCHA-led system to register assistance, offers, and deliveries. The World Food Programme is airlifting more food from Barbados, enough for 6,000 households for up to a week. And in Cuba, where the UN launched the plan of action yesterday to help 1 million of the hardest hit people in support of authorities' efforts, OCHA warns the humanitarian situation is dire. Some 120,000 people remain in shelters due to continued flooding, overflowing rivers and landslides, and 29 communities remain isolated. More than 45,000 housing structures, nearly 500 health facilities, and over 1,500 educational centers have sustained damage. And we'll hear more about the Hurricane Melissa aftermath from our guest. But before we turn to him, are there any questions for me? Yes, please.
Thank you. This is Tao Xu with the China Center Television. I have a question about the climate change. So when we talk about the global climate change action, China often played a key role. So what's your view on the China's role and efforts in fighting the climate change? Thank you.
Clearly, the Secretary General believes that all countries need to do more to deal with the consequences of climate change. Having said that, he has been very pleased by the progress that China has been making, both in terms of reducing its own greenhouse gas emissions, but also in terms of advancing clean technology so that other countries can also benefit and turn to a more economically and environmentally sustainable practice. Yes, Namo.
Thank you, Farhan. One question on Turkey. The European Court of Human Rights has called for the release of Saladin Demirtas, like a prominent Kurdish lawmaker. Does the United Nations or Secretary General make a similar call?
We will leave the matter in the hands of the European Court of Justice. From our standpoint, we believe that all political detainees should have the right to be released. Yes, Noreen.
Thanks, Farhan. I want to follow up on something you mentioned about about one of the impediments you're facing in Gaza due to sufficient warehouses. Could you clarify on what that means exactly? Whether it's like a lack of space, or if it's like a lack of, or if like there are fewer warehouses that can actually hold enough aid.
What we want is for there to be enough warehouse capacity that aid can be stored in Gaza, but that's only one of the problems. One of the larger problems has simply been that a lot of NGOs have not been able to bring aid in, either because it was regarded as dual use, it was regarded by the Israeli authorities as falling outside of the scope of humanitarian aid, or alternately, they had deemed that those organizations were not authorized to bring relief items into Gaza. What we want is to make sure that all groups, all of the humanitarian NGOs have the capacity to bring in aid. It's very crucial that everyone's involved in the effort and they have the visas and the clearances that they need. Yes, Gabriel.
Thank you, Farhan. Does the SG have any comment about Israel resuming airstrikes on southern Lebanon? That early reports are at least one has been killed and 9 wounded.
Yeah, we've seen reports of Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon, including in UNIFIL's area of operations. We once again urge the parties to uphold the cessation of hostilities and refrain from any activities that may endanger civilians. Yes, Abdul Hamid.
Thank you. An old woman called Haniya Hannoun died while the Israelis storming the house, trying to arrest her son in the village called Al-Mizra Al-Sharqiyya. Any comment on that?
Again, as you weren't here when I read out what I said about continuing attacks in which civilians have died, but one of the things I said at the time is that these military activities put civilians at risk, and we remind the Israeli military of its obligation to take constant care to spare them throughout its operations.
Okay. Also, there is a confiscation of land in northern Jordan Valley this morning as well. Are you aware of that?
Yes, as you know, we've stood against the confiscations of land, and we want any sort of activity, including settlement activity, to be halted. And if that's it for now, let me turn now to our guest,